Rotate the problem, my friends. Rotate the problem. And I beat my high score. I don't know. Oh, what a waste. After 15 years of shipping products, I've seen a lot of tools come and go. A few weeks ago, Anthropic shipped Claude Design. I built a game with it. Let me share the journey that I went on, some tips, tricks, and lessons learned. It started out with a simple mission. I needed to build a portfolio website. I hadn't put one together in a long time. So I decided, let's test some of this new tech out. Now, I started out just going to Claude Code and using my expertise and my whimsy, I put together a relatively classy website, I would say, refined, if you will. It was nice, but there was nothing special about it. So I ended up going to a website called Godly for inspiration. I'll be showing that later. I'll be showing a lot later. First, I'm stepping through all of the process. But I went there and I saw this one website that had these squiggly lines that would follow you down as you scrolled through the website. Finally, I had some inspiration to work with. So I thought, okay, can I use that? More importantly, can I use it as part of a broader motif or narrative rather than something that I just kind of attached to the website? I wasn't thinking of anything, but I thought, what if I did more than a squiggly line? What if I made it interactive beyond just scrolling the mouse? What if, depending on what you're looking at or clicking, it changed shape or who knows what? But again, I came up empty with specific inspiration. Then I decided, or I thought to myself, if I'm going to make things interactive, why don't I just make a game? Okay, what if the website was a game? Too much. I just need a portfolio website. Calm down, Nick. Calm down. Then I thought, what might actually be easier is if I create a simple game and embed it in the hero of the website or something like that. That's what I ended up doing. That's where Turn came from. And you'll see more in the video, or you can jump ahead using the chapters if you want. But the next decision was, okay, what game? I'm not going to create a brand new IP from scratch. That's not the purpose of this. One game that I ruled out immediately was Snake. Every AI demonstration uses Snake. So I wasn't going to do that. Now, I've been playing a variation on Tetris for the last couple months. So that's where my mind went. And then I was thinking, okay, how do I make it my own? The copy on my website was already talking about rotating the problem or the question to get better answers. Rotating. Okay, Tetris rotates. Okay, but what's unique about my twist? What if instead of rotating the pieces, the objects, you rotated the board? Turn was born. I want to talk about how the workflow went. So I was working in Claude Design and Claude Code, and there was a separation of concerns. Inside Claude Design, I was focused on the visuals, the aesthetics, the motions, the graphics in general. In Claude Code, I was focused on the game mechanics, the rules, how things worked under the hood, how players get points. What does it mean when you level up? How do you lose a life? All sorts of things like that. That's where I was specializing in Claude Code, whereas Claude Design was, what does it look like when you level up? What happens visually if you clear a line? Those sorts of things. So that's one distinction of work. Another is bulk versus one-off iterative building or design. If you can, I recommend going bulk as much as possible, because when you go in bulk, then you have a whole bunch of work and the agent that you're working with can spin up a bunch of sub-agents. It has a kind of persistent focus that it can keep track of. And especially if it's spinning up sub-agents, it's shooting instructions and context to those agents each time while it is directing and managing. And there is a persistent line of thought going through there and purpose. Also, if you have a whole bunch of work to do, that justifies going through the planning stage. And when you do the planning stage, the AI tends to perform a lot better. If you just have one little thing that you notice, oh, I need this switched, it doesn't quite justify doing a planning stage. But that doesn't mean you never do the one-offs or the iterative back and forth. Sometimes that is the best thing to do, but have a bias for the bulk work. Now, when I was working inside Claude Design on the visual aspect, almost by definition, I was doing bulk work basically all the time, because the way that things were working was I would go to Claude Design and do a whole bunch of stuff, set a whole bunch of visuals, go through variations and pick the right ones that I want, and have all of that packaged for a handoff that I would download and then hand off to Claude Code. Basically, in Claude Design, I was doing a series of iterative back and forth within bulk work and then hand that off. So the third distinction of working was, how deep do I go? Meaning, do I just go straight to implementation? That's if you're doing the iterative or one-off thing, the back and forth. You notice something, you say if it worked, how to improve it. You're just basically doing a rhythm of implement after implement. I already mentioned planning. Now, what I did at the very start of this project to build Turn was I started with brainstorming. I had the initial idea, Tetris, but different, basically. And I did a brainstorm session in Claude Code about what all the mechanics could be, what visual and aesthetic things I should consider. And then once I finished that, I had the agent draft a PRD. And I skimmed through it. And it's skimming because we already had a full conversation. The PRD is really more for the agent's value than for my value, to make sure that the agent is thinking through everything and that everything is correctly applied for the next step, which is the plan, which I also review lightly. I'm not reading every letter, but we go through all those stages and then we can implement. That's if you want to do the full from A to Z thing. You can do anything in between though. There were several things that didn't quite go right in the handoffs between Claude Design and Claude Code sometimes. One of them was I had some animations that were looking amazing in Claude Design. And then when I went to Claude Code and had it implemented, it didn't look right. What I found was happening in Claude Design, the agent was generating these preview visuals, but they were previews and they were smaller than the real thing. So what was looking great in the previews was really just 1 or 2 pixel bits and pieces, but they didn't look that small in the preview. And I thought that the implementer agent in Claude Code was mistranslating. It was doing it wrong. It turns out it was faithfully implementing the plan. And the problem was that the original visuals were built for a preview and not for the real thing. That is something for you to look out for. Claude Design may try to go for the spirit of things, which is great, and it actually kind of saves time and everything. But if you're not on the lookout for that, then you may pass on instructions for other agents that do not meet what you actually need in the real thing. Okay, this is now talking about my own game design bias. I've designed board games in the past, and one of the things that I've caught myself on a lot, I have a bias of my own of liking to just watch things and see them play out, basically run simulations and then call it a game. That's bad. Players need to feel a lot more agency than a simulation allows for. And there's certain aspects of a game where if a player runs into a situation where they have no-win scenarios too often or in too important of situations, they're just going to bail. They're not going to play your game anymore. And I saw it happen in the game. And as I did a playthrough, I noticed like 3 times in a row, there's a piece that wasn't going to fit no matter how many times I turned. I did it again, I lose. Now, that meant I had to make some kind of adjustment, but there's a tension because one of the draws is the simplicity of the game. And if I bolt on a couple more features that introduce some more controls and everything, maybe I lose that. Where I ended up landing was, in addition to rotating the grid, you can move the pieces up and down, the pieces that are coming into the play area. When it comes to working with AI, this is what I've noticed every time. You're able to get a close approximation of the product or experience that you're after just a few hours. Sometimes it takes just 2 or 3 hours. Sometimes it's a full workday, maybe a day and a half. But with AI, you're able to achieve what used to take months or at least weeks in just a few hours. And you're 80% of the way there. And you technically have a product or a feature or what have you. But that's when the real work begins. That's when you start working on a bunch of small things, and it feels like diminishing returns because of the tiny size of things that you're working on compared to all of the huge things that you just got done in several hours. But that's where the real compounding value happens, and that's where you create something that no one else has or would. If you use the oil metaphor like I am on the screen here, the first 80% gets the oil out of the ground, but no one is going to put that oil in their car. That takes some refinement, not just some, it takes a lot of refinement after that. I think that there is a great metaphor between working with AI and working with magic, because AI has been trained on all of the best people in any category of work or business or hobbies doing things a certain way and using a certain type of language. One of the ways that people who work in a field, for instance, whether it's design, engineering, whatever, one of the ways that they have a leg up on the competition is they know the lingo. They know how to ask for a certain type of thing to get exactly the result that they want. And someone else might be able to arrive there, but it's going to take them a lot longer, and it's probably not going to be quite as good or quite what they were looking for. So working with AI now and into the future is literally like magic. If you know the magic words, you're able to do things better and quicker than anyone else. And that's doubly the case if you are an expert in your field of design or whatever, but you're also an expert in your domain. That's a lot of magic words for you to use. If you're a designer, and this logic applies to anything that anyone is doing in any field, but I'm talking about Claude design today, so I'm speaking to designers primarily. Don't push your own pixels. Developers, for the most part, are no longer writing their own code. Writers mostly aren't typing their own articles and books. If you're a designer and you're fiddling around, moving things a pixel or two here and there, and that's where you're living, you're wasting time, in my opinion. What I recommend doing is working in tokens, in components, in code bases, and you make changes there. Now, there's an asterisk to that. Sometimes you're exploring, sometimes you're wandering around, sometimes you don't have the net, sometimes you don't have a design system yet, or you're working on something that it doesn't make sense to build out a design system first and then do things. I totally understand. That's what I did for my portfolio site and Turn. I didn't start out with a design system. I just started building. But as I was building, I collected tokens and components, and a design system grew around me as I worked. And this is just for a very small project, mind you. If you are working on an enterprise SaaS or something, you surely have a tokenized design system, a component library, and ideally, you have access to a code base that you can pull from as well. If you find yourself making a bunch of fiddly changes with text or where an icon or a button lives and things like that, I would recommend considering how you could turn that into a design decision that is part of your system rather than something that you're doing by hand. Let me show some more examples and visuals of what I experienced throughout this process. So this is godly.website. And I was looking around, looking at things, and several websites gave me inspiration. And all that I was doing was I was hovering over things. I wasn't even clicking on them most of the time. But the one that I was referring to, oh no, I lost it. Oh, there we go. Here we go. Walter Sophia. So you see the lines as you scroll down, and it's making images that fit. There is a fit there. It's not just drawing for drawing's sake. I wanted something that was at least that fitting. And I wasn't coming up with anything, not for like a line thing that followed you. And that's why I eventually ended up settling on making a game. So what is it like inside Claude Design? It was really cool, honestly. And the fact that it connects, not directly yet, although I imagine they're working on it, but the fact that it connects with Claude Code relatively seamlessly. You just ask for a handoff package and it gives you something that you download and you unzip. Then you just tell Claude Code, hey, work with this. And you can ask it for either a prompt or like a README for the other agent to work with. It was great. The faithful implementation of the things that were designed and put together in Claude Design was really good in my experience. By the way, I'm really excited that Claude Design is part of the same usage limits as Claude.ai and Claude Code, okay? So up until today, there was a separate thing down here just for Claude Design, but now it's part of all of your work. So you can use your entire subscription for Claude Design work now. But yeah, just as an example, this is actually, so this is where, when I just got started in Claude Design with this project, I had already in Claude Code had a conversation and I had shared a few screenshots there. And I had decided, you know what, for something that's very geometric and linear like Tetris, what I'm going to go for instead of the reserved and refined look that I had previously, I'm going completely the opposite direction. I'm going to go Tron, baby. And it's going to be neon lines and glowing things everywhere. In the game, the website itself is going to be restrained in comparison. So after that, I had a short conversation with Claude Design. It asked me a bunch of questions and it gave me a bunch of possibilities for visual directions. Once you see the game, you'll notice that a lot of this ended up going in that direction. These are not just stills. As you can see here, there's a whole bunch of animations, so I can really get a feel for what things work or wouldn't work for what I'm trying to achieve. And it's everything from the grid itself to the heads-up display. And these were the locked down decisions that were handed to the implementing agent. And this was early on. This was after just a little bit of time spent with Claude Design. This is the promise of how fast that you can move and iterate and share work with tools like this. Let me share a few more things. I noticed that in the HUD, it wasn't quite representing things right. It was scrunching everything around the grid because it didn't know that there's a whole bunch of space around it and that the grid is just kind of in the center and the pieces are coming at you from both sides. So I just drew this and had squigglies, and then I just talked to Claude saying, hey, I drew something, there's pieces coming in from both sides, there's area above and below, but especially on both sides. This is what the HUD should actually be working with. And after that, all the future HUDs were properly sized and the grid was properly oriented. And all it took was a crappy drawing and a couple sentences of explanation. And from that point forward, we were aligned on that point. There's something called that's an orbital blast is what I ended up calling it. Doesn't matter what it does, at least not right now. But this was the first attempt that it took. You can see like it got a lot of what I was describing, but the lightning is not good. So there were some better things. I liked some things that were happening there and that as well. I didn't like the pulses though and the confetti. No, that wasn't right. But like I gave all the feedback and it took that feedback and it went further and we got a lot closer to what I was looking for, including like the shake and everything. Eventually where we landed was this right here. which is what's in the game right now. It feels much more powerful. It feels much more like a beam, and it's all procedurally generated. So I don't need a bunch of heavy files or anything, and it's really sleek, really nice, in my opinion. The next thing, I wanted different options for when a piece locks into place. And again, I'm just showing you these because I didn't ask for specifics on a lot of these things. I didn't tell it to do these layouts like this. I didn't ask for it to follow the colors and everything in my burgeoning design system that at this point wasn't a design system yet. It just knew to do all of these things for me, and it knows how to help me out and make decisions using elements like this. That is really the power of Claude design, in my opinion. It's not necessarily the final visuals that you land on. It's not even the code that it generates that you can hand off to agents that implement things, although both of those are super helpful. It's the fact that it's such a great conversation partner with visuals. It helps you make high quality decisions fast. This next one is I was working on how do I make the lines when they're cleared? How do I make them impressive? Because this is a video game. When something exciting or important happens, it must be felt. And this was not impressive. This is what it looked like when that missed. It wasn't a mistranslation because it was actually faithfully implemented, but each of these little vectors was just a single pixel. It looked pathetic. It looked great in those. There were little previews in, I think it may have been in this one. Yeah, like in this preview, I was like, okay, yeah, this is working. But when we got here, like in context, it was horrible, pathetic. But then, okay, this is larger particles. You can see this is after me having a conversation, like saying, this isn't working for me. Let's do better. So that improved. But then once I could see it, I realized that it looks really too much like confetti, and that does not fit what we're going for. And this was basically the same thing. So we iterated, you can see that's V5. So there are 3 iterations between index and V5 here. And we arrived with something along these lines. It's not quite what's in production now, but this is almost there. And then finally, I don't know if you're going to find this interesting, but I was working on the heads-up display layout, and there's a bunch of iterations that I'm not even showing. Again, the value isn't helping me make decisions, and I was going through option after option after option and making tweak after tweak very quickly. So yeah, that's what these were looking a lot like initially. And then moving forward, this is towards the end where I was really nailing down how I wanted things to feel a bit more when it came to the motion, the animation, and the colors of things. You can get a real sense for how this might feel in context of the game. And I eventually ended with these animations. Now, as I mentioned, as I was working, it turned into a design system. It's actually more complete on my hard drive than it is here. The way that Claude design works is there's a bunch of options, but the way that it worked for me was I have my site here, and it's reading from there and converting it into a version for Claude design. So this is something that you'll find more and more as we continue to work with AI for code and for design, is there's going to be translations and interpretations of design systems and libraries all over the place. As long as you have something that follows some kind of standard and is understandable by pattern recognition for AI, you're going to be fine. The closer that you can get to like official standards, the better. But especially if you're working on small or short-term projects. The stakes are relatively low as long as you have things built in a patterned way. All right, let's see here. Okay, let's go to the product. Let's go to the portfolio in the game. So you see that the portfolio looks like this, and it's borrowing a lot of the aesthetics from the game. It's just a little bit reserved when compared to the game. If you go into the game, you push space here. Now we're in. Now, here's one other thing that I wanted to make sure that I mention, and that is this debug menu. We'll pause. So this is pretty common for game development. I needed this because there's all sorts of states that are only achievable in the mid game or late game or when you die, things that I needed to be able to test. And I couldn't just play the game for 20 minutes each time that I needed to test that thing. So we've got a menu here that gives the ability for me to specify certain states or things that I want to achieve just after I set the button, and then I can test it. I would recommend, as much as you can do something like that, do this for your products, because you're going to be able to test so many experiences in a much more convenient way, which means you will uncover bugs and important bugs much easier. The sun is setting and creating a weird light, so I think that's a sign. If anything in this video looks like the type of thinking that your team needs, I'm available for work. Reach out to me. The link to my website is below. Now, let's watch me play the game. Yeah, come on. Okay. Yes, it helps. Keep it going. All right. Things. Oh, I'll just say things are kind of aligning. Oh, that works. All right, I have a new high score. Excellent. Oh no. I kind of screwed myself there, didn't I? One life left. Oh, that was nice. I'm getting nervous. Almost made a terrible mistake there. We'll fill that in a bit. You there. Now you. There. Oh no. Ah.